atom bomb. I want her in my wigwam. She's just the way I want her to be, a million times hotter than TNT. Baby, little atom bomb.
I actually have a guest on the second episode of this podcast already. This is unbelievable because today I'm joined by Dr. Ham. Dr. Ham, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I am so happy to to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to this.
Yeah, sure. No, I like talking about Fallen Equestria. It's why I write a story.
Yes, yeah. There are so many topics to discuss, and I know last week I said that I would bring up world building, but we got to talking, and we got onto the subject of Red Eye. So let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure thing.
Well, what about Red Eye did you mostly want to discuss?
Well, I mean, there's a few different topics that I could talk about with him. I guess like briefly at a glance, we talked about the whole slavery thing and so on and so forth. I think the one person, the person who posted saying, oh, how was it believable that Little Pip suddenly has this anti-slavery vibe? How did she even get that? I kind of figure that kind of person is more of an outlier, I would guess. But I don't know, like, specifically, the thing is, like, when touching on Red Eye is, the devil's in the details with him, Mm-hmm. And I first read Fallen Equestria like 3 years ago? 3.25 years ago?
That would have made it about 2014. No, not 2014.
2013.
2013.
And I do want to say about 3.5 years ago or more. No, it wasn't quite that long. It was about 3 years ago. I know because Wasteland Economics is coming up on 3 years old next February. And I started working on that in the previous November. And I pretty much... The acceleration from reading Fallen Equestria to writing a story happened pretty fast. The point being that my memory for some of the details, especially pertaining to Red Eye, are a bit fuzzy.
Yes, same here. I can't, every so often I'll have to go back into the main thing to remind myself, what the hell happened? And I'm still constantly getting reminded of certain little details that happened in the story. I'm trying to think of a specific example right now, but I know a friend of mine had pointed out, like, oh yeah, this had happened in the story, and I was like, no, that didn't happen. No. And then he brought it up, and like, oh shit, yeah, you're right, but I can't remember specifically what you're talking about. But yeah, same for me. I can't remember a whole lot of details, but I do sort of remember the general picture.
That's the weird thing, setting. Is that I've got a great mind. I usually have a good memory for details, just specifically some of the nuances with Red Eye. I don't remember. There are some things I do remember, because I was actually, for a brief time, I was going to do for myself a couple minutes long radio broadcasts where I would pretend to be Red Eye giving sermons, right? Yeah. Just this Tumblr thing. And God, what was I? How did my voice go for that? I know I deliberately avoided the Southern Baptist preacher thing because I didn't get that vibe. So I kind of went for a very the goddess will bless you. Yes, I think this was about the voice I was going to do for Red Eye. You see, Little Pip, we're not so different, you and I. I think that was the voice I was going to do.
See, when I was, because I was just reading the Philadelphia chapters just the other day to sort of catch myself up to speed about those specific chapters, and I was reading through the dialogue, and at one point I do remember about Red Eye was that he had this very charismatic voice. He was and he was very likable. In like this sort of oh my god, your charisma and your energy.
Yeah.
And so, okay, and now I have to pull up the chapters now, because now I want to give my own rendition of how I would read his lines, so give me just one moment here.
Go for it. Actually, while you're looking, there's one topic that did come to mind about a detail that a lot of people just seem to forget.
What's that?
And that is the almost incongruity of the first alicorn that Little Pip found.
Oh,
everyone
in Old Appaloosa?
Yeah, everyone remembers that's the one she dropped a boxcar on, right? Yes. How do you forget that? But what people don't seem to remember is what that alicorn was spouting. What complete nonsense that alicorn was spouting. She was threatening to chop up Little Pip's friends into a stew and feed them to the foals.
To be honest, the alicorns were sort of a proxy of the super mutants who themselves... Okay, I'm sorry. When I say super mutants, what I mean to say are the Bethesda Fallout 3 super mutants, not the original Fallout 1 and 2 super mutants, who were actually intelligent and not crazy psychopathic, as Bethesda interpreted them as.
But that's the thing. That's the thing, is that the goddess was intelligent. And the goddess, when Little Pip spoke to the goddess, it wasn't like that. So then it raises the question in my mind, well, how much control did the goddess really have over individual alicorns?
That is a very good question. It's there are actually a lot of very good questions.
I don't mean to sidetrack us. Sorry.
There are so many topics to get into Fallout Equestria. That is going to have to be one of them that I'll have to get into later. But let's switch back tracks to Red Eye.
Sure.
And how he did nothing wrong.
So to dive at the angle that I sort of scratched the surface of when we talked briefly about Little Pip and her encounter with slavery, and that's the whole it's and I feel like almost the Fallout 3 in New Vegas, well, less New Vegas, Fallout 3 kind of has this problem where there is a slave trade, but they never quite explain how there is a slave trade. Who is buying these slaves? I mean, the slavers are always shown with great weapons, great armor, and the same holds true for Fallout Equestria. But it is almost never, up until the point we get to where Red Eye is buying up all these slaves. The weird thing is that it seemed like this whole slave trade was actually already established, and Red Eye just became the biggest buyer. So Murky provides us with one example where there was this there was a farmer. I think it was a farmer. I've only read the first chapter of Murky, and I don't remember. I take that back. I remember some of it, but I believe his former master, the one that owned his mother, and clipped his wings, basically, was some kind of farmer. And it just, I guess there'd be that kind of market, but it just seems really expensive to buy another mouth to feed for work, especially when they're going to be looking for every chance to get out. I don't know.
I imagine that the slave trade as it exists in Fallout 3 and Fallout Equestria by extension, despite Bethesda, the writers not really going into a lot of detail as they usually do, it had to have worked a lot the same way that the original slave trade did, in America at least. Honestly, I haven't really looked much into American slave trade and how beyond buying slaves, how they're able to afford everything. Because, yeah, like buying slaves and you would make back the money from the crops you would sell of them working the land, but you would also have to clothe them, you would have to feed them, you would have to house them. That costs a lot of money. So where does, like...
See, I think the key difference is, and that's where Red Eye kind of overtakes this as being another viable buyer, is volume, right? Like the historical slave trade, the biggest buyers were plantation farms,
Right.
where you needed several dozen to work the fields, and you had acres of whatever crop they were harvesting or working. And I mean, so Red Eye was building up this whole industrial complex where he was going to rebuild Equestria from. And I honestly don't actually know where he got his money. And that's a different question for another time, I guess. Because, come to think of it, how was he paying all of those guards and griffins?
Well, in order to... It's sort of like an investment, and you have to start off small and build up your money slowly over time. So, I imagine the first thing that Red Eye had to have done was had to get money from Stable 101 somehow, either by renting it out for people to inhabit or by selling the equipment that was inside the stable. Because, okay, so obviously Stable 1 had to have the technology for to have cybernetics. Yeah. That's some advanced technology, and maybe he used that technology to sell it and make a lot of money off that. That's my first thought that comes to mind.
You're right. I think you're right. I think that's, yeah. If not selling the cybernetics directly, selling technology derived from it, or maybe even selling very expensive augmentations.
Yeah, as a sort of service, because we know that he gave cybernetics to a dragon. How he met this dragon, that's another topic for another day.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Was it implied that it was the dragon from Smoky Mountain?
Well, it had to have been, because there weren't a whole lot of dragons to see in the first season of My Little Pony.
That's true. No, you're right. I keep forgetting. You know, we've seen so much of the world of Equestria in subsequent seasons. I keep forgetting that this was all made back in season 1.
Yeah, and K-Cat essentially using every element from season 1 into the the original story.
Mm-hmm. But like Red Eye's whole operation, you know, the cybernetics,
yes,
makes sense as some initial capital, as it were. But
then how do you sustain this this currency?
Yeah, it's you know, it's not like, okay, let's say you have don't have a finite resource there. You know, let's say you have enough technology, or I'm sorry, let's say you have enough technological know-how to reproduce these cybernetics, or the tech derived from said cybernetics. There's only only so many people in the wasteland that can afford to buy them. That's the other half of the coin. You may have some very expensive, very fancy goods, but how many people can actually afford it? And moreover, how do you get the word out to them? But that's, I mean, now he had a radio station. I take that back.
But he didn't have a radio station until he got to Philadelphia.
Wasn't Stable 101 in Philadelphia?
No, I'm pretty sure Stable 101 was in the Everfree Forests, I think?
I think you're right. You might be right.
Because the fortress that Little Pip goes to, isn't that just a refurbished Stable 101?
The fortress was, if I recall correctly, the fortress was like a actually, was the fortress the old castle of the two sisters?
That's another thing I was thinking, because I'm trying to remember. Okay, yes, yeah, obviously, because the Castle of the Two Sisters is the first thing we see in the first 2 episodes of the series.
Yeah.
So yes, okay, okay, so that's probably what the fortress is. It probably is the Castle of the Two Sisters.
So it's the castle that was kind of refurbished with material from Stable 101, like cutting the walls out to replace the roof, for example, because that place was ruined before the bombs fell.
Oh yeah.
I guess it's just the kind of thing where he had this whole grand plan to rebuild Equestria, but and maybe this is explored. I'm almost certain this is explored further in Murky number 7, because I remember in the first chapter they had the whole scene with the maybe in the second chapter, but they had the whole scene with that slave marketplace, right? Where he goes to and he actually tries to. No, so one of the doctors, basically says, "I won't give you Radaway until you steal this thing from this other guy." So it almost seems like he just left the slave population to their devices. I guess kind of like how the pit was in Fallout 3, where they had their own trade. They probably got rations from the guards, but then had to scrounge for whatever else they could do.
Yeah, how they sort of had to do a bit of spelunking in the ruins for supplies.
But yeah, it just does seem weird to me that the whole infrastructure existed before Red Eye. Like, clearly Red Eye could sustain this whole slave population. But the town of Old Appaloosa being set up beforehand as this known slave trade spot. I don't know. Maybe it only just became that after Red Eye came to power. Maybe the slave trade just existed with Red Eye. And I missed a reference to that somewhere.
I kind of think that Red Eye was the person to sort of kickstart the whole slave thing, because this whole idea is born out of him wanting to give rebirth to Equestria as a whole. He wants to rebuild it. Right. And he needs workers. Yeah, and I really didn't see anywhere else where there were slaves, so it's like Red Eye was the one. Okay, so ponies need to be fought or need to be forced against their will to work together to make Equestria great again. It's not even that Red Eye thought ponies couldn't work together without, being forced to. It was shitty work that you probably couldn't pay a majority of wasteland ponies to deal with. No. And I'm sure the whole trade got started with just buying up criminals from various towns. Heck, we saw that raiders ended up as slaves in Red Eye's camp. Now, wouldn't that be an interesting thought? Like, Red Eye just didn't enslave any, anyone he came across. He only enslaved, the criminals of the wasteland. He would enslave the raiders. He would enslave the rapers, and just a lot of dirty people like that. It's sort of like that one episode of Rick and Morty where we see Unity, and she's made this hive mind of this entire race, it's comes to question. People should be given their individuality, but it turns out that everyone that was forced to be a part of this hive mind, they were all former criminals and just bad people. So, and the slaves in the original story aren't really gone into that much depth, and we do see Blood and Daffodil, who are raiders. And we do know that, but here's the thing that sort of throws all of this away I was about to say that in old Appaloosa there were children in cages, but it's later revealed that Red Eye was actually treating the children with dignity and actually teaching them stuff, and they were in classes. So
he was, but the children were still kidnapped.
Yeah, they were.
And while I'm sure Red Eye put out the call, bring me the dregs of the wasteland.
Yeah.
The thing is that he had also the dregs of the wasteland working for him. And when you say, I'll pay 500 caps per head, they say, well, there's not enough criminals to make a real profit, but that guy is wandering off on his own.
Right, and then you
really
get...
gonna question it.
Yeah, and then you get innocent ponies caught up in the whole mess, and that's when things just start to get out of control.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a thought.
Exactly. And maybe that is how Red Eye set up the trade. Maybe he just turned a blind eye to this, or just saw it as a necessary evil. Like he said himself, that slavery itself was a necessary evil for him. But maybe this was just an extension of that, these innocent ponies were getting caught up. It's like, yes, but they're going to make a better world for the children. And didn't care.
And this was the thing about Red Eye that I personally found frustratingly amazing. Because he... As you said, all of this was a necessary evil, and he admitted that, oh god, this is the worst thing. I'm going to burn in Tartarus for this, and I'm not going to be a part of the new Equestria when it is born, because I'm just that terrible of a pony. And I like that he acknowledges the fact that he is a bad pony for doing all of this.
He does, but it doesn't stop him from saying, I will not be... Like, he tells Little Pip straight up, I want you to lead my operation once I've done all the evil things. And Little Pip asks, why, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to become God. Because that was his plan. He wasn't going to remove himself from the equation. There is the heroic sacrifice of making yourself a villain in order to let the world move on, as it were. But this was just, I'm going to lead this operation until it doesn't need the firm hand anymore, and then I'm just going to become the god.
Yeah, once you start to consider that, it really makes him seem to have this really inflated ego about himself.
Oh, he wasn't... I'm almost willing to say it wasn't necessarily that he had an inflated ego. I'm actually willing to chalk that up to him being a control freak. He is he would strike me as the kind of character that wouldn't trust the fate of the world to anyone else. You know? He is so convinced that his way is the only way that he cannot imagine anyone else running it well enough. Like he'd be the kind of boss who goes into retirement and calls up every week just to make sure things are going okay and offering advice, you know?
Yeah, to go back about his plan to become the god, like he would be a part of the god, because his ultimate plan was to recreate the potion for taint, and it would be him, a unicorn, and a Pegasus, because he was a little bit. Personally, I feel that Red Eye is a little racist, because he said the problem with the goddess was that they were all unicorns. It was like, oh, like only unicorns, no earth ponies. I'm so triggered right now.
Well, I think I swear, I think he covered that in like when he was talking about the creation of this goddess, and basically why, and that was why he thought the goddess was unstable. You know, what he wanted to do, if I remember right, was effectively create a true alicorn, right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't see himself. His plan wasn't to become the goopy monstrosity that Trixie and Twilight and the Gemini twins that was
Just
wow.
and Mosaic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. They were still siblings.
Yes.
Anyway. That he thought the mixture of the three races would bring more balance and make a more complete. It wasn't the exclusion of Earth ponies, but the fact that it wasn't the three races in harmony, which is, to be fair, a running theme.
It is, yeah.
But he also, the biggest thing he pointed out is his theory also rode on the idea of wondering, so why did Trixie become the dominant personality? Because she was the most charismatic. That was his theory. And so he stares at Little Pip, because I think Little Pip asks him point blank, how do you know you'll be the one in control? So he says, well, Twilight was the most powerful unicorn in Equestria, and yet Trixie is the dominant personality. Why? She's a show pony. She had the charisma. She had the force of personality, which that was him being egotistical, saying, oh no, I have that force of personality. I will be the dominant mind here.
Red Eye, you cheeky motherfucker.
And then of course he just dies.
Yeah.
Like his death seems so anticlimactic, but I don't know.
And typical stupid Earth pony to hope that a unicorn would forget about her telekinesis and not use it.
I forget what was the exact. Like I know he basically just died when the wall collapsed on him.
Yeah, more or less. But before that, he tried to just jump into the vat of taint, and then.
Oh, that's right. That was it. Yeah, he just literally tried to jump and knew that Little Pip was really strong with telekinesis. Like he knew this, and he still Yeah,
and yet he hoped that she would forget about her own magic for some Red Eye. Like, he was shown, well, it's arguable that, like, he's smarter than that, because there's a lot about some of his plans that's not smart, like the whole... Well, it's not really that he's smart, but there's not a lot of thought put into a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of thought put into a lot of stuff. And I would say he one of the biggest problems he had was simply not necessarily being able to accurately predict what people would do. He planned a lot of stuff, but his plans nested within what he predicted of other ponies' actions.
Effectively a Batman gambit.
Yeah, Which, by the way, having recently reread the entire Thrawn trilogy, thanks audiobooks.
This podcast is not sponsored by audiobooks.
Audiobooks isn't a real thing. I didn't say where I got it from.
Oh, okay, all right, my bad.
No, I'm just.
Wait, no. When I said audiobooks, I meant Audible. But
Oh,
anyways,
yeah.
Go on.
No, I didn't say Audible. Did you say Audible? I didn't say Audible. But no, it just makes it easier to listen to while I'm in my commute. But it's like, so while Thrawn, to bring in another like charismatic, intelligent villain, Thrawn, who I will also criticize sometimes for like, okay, how did you make this leap of logic? And the excuse is always because I studied their art. It's like, okay, occasionally maybe sometimes that gets abused too much, but at the same time, they show him trying to psychologically analyze the people he's going to predict. Whereas Red-Eye, we just see him making plans. And maybe part of that is that we only see it from Little Pip's perspective, and we don't know what went into his plans. We know what she interpreted of his plans.
Yeah, I know I would love to see an interpretation of Red-Eye and his perspective on the events of his life. I know that Murky Number 7 does go into this. I can't say how... I don't know how much because I haven't read that far, but...
Yeah, go figure. The two of us who have not read Murky Number 7 trying to talk about Red-Eye here.
I feel like a terrible person.
It's the strength of Murky Number 7 is not necessarily what it explored about Red-Eye, but what it explores about Philadelphia, and the ponies within it. So Red-Eye's presence, like, this is just me not knowing a damn thing of much of what goes on in Murky Number 7. But I have to imagine that Red-Eye's presence in that story has to be kept to a minimum, because he's kind of... how do we put this? To bring this back to Star Wars, it would be like if you were writing a Star Wars fan fiction and you have Darth Vader show up. It is a extremely threatening presence that you know for a fact the heroes cannot overcome because the villain's death is already written. So the heroes have no choice but to lose against this villain. They exist to shut the heroes down. Which is, I have to imagine what Red-Eye's presence would be to a story with the scope of Murky Number 7.
Yeah, I would have to imagine that he would sort of show up and just remind everybody that, yeah, he exists and he's a character that exists in this universe, but nothing much else beyond that.
But was he even really a character to Murky? Like, again, from the little I read of Murky, it just seemed like he was, the law. You saw him occasionally at these rallies, but you didn't think of him as just another pony. Someone that, like, hell, the CEO of the companies I work for, they are so far above what I handle that it's just, yeah, you know what? You guys are, I'm not even gonna get in your way. Just, nope, you do your thing.
The way you're describing this, it sounds like to Murky, Red-Eye is a god to Murky. A god in that he's sort of this omnipresent being that's out of sight, but he's still in mind.
I didn't want to say god. Like, that feels like it's taking it too far, but I mean, you're not wrong. The thought had occurred to me that, but instead, I would rather. how else to put this, that Red Eye was as permanent a fixture to life in Philadelphia as the buildings themselves.
Something that you just sort of, like, you see all around you, you sort of feel it all around you.
Yeah.
It's just this general air to it.
Yeah. An immovable presence that is always going to be there, no matter what. But again, this is all speculating on a story that is one chapter away from ending that neither of us have read.
No.
Yeah. It's a fun conversation theorizing without knowing what the hell's going to happen or what the hell happened. But yeah. I don't know.
There's a lot to be said, and it's hard to tackle just one thing specifically about Red Eye and everything involving him.
Now, the one thing I'll say is I'll say absolutely in his favor was his goal of clearing out the Everfree forest. Like, bravo, good job. That's, you know what? As someone who has written a shitty place to live, the Everfree Forest sounds like a shitty place to live.
Yeah, the whole Killing joke.
Yeah, the existence of Killing joke alone is just ridiculous.
No, thank you. I would not want that.
Did Killing Joke ever affect anyone in Little Pip's party? I don't think so.
Zenith.
What happened to Zenith?
She bled a lot. Her stripes turned red, and she bled.
Oh, did they just like turn into
stripes.
cuts?
Yeah, really big cuts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the only I remember the of course I remember the Fluttershy tree thing.
Naturally, yeah. Memes!
I mean, it's a topic for another time, I guess, but
2011 My Little Pony memes!
I have to say I did roll my eyes a little at Fluttershy tree. And including the fact that was the stakes to prevent Red Eye from burning down the Everfree Forest. Because they were going to kill the Fluttershy tree. Which, to be fair, turned out to be Fluttershy still alive.
And she was turned back into a pony off screen.
You know what? Controversial opinion. I liked the Gardens of Equestria epilogue. I did.
I mean, like, it's a good idea, but it was rushed. I'll say that personally, but that's me, and clearly this is gonna have to be a topic for another day.
I know, that's true. You're right. But yeah, as for... I know I ended up starting this whole thing by asking a bunch of questions, like, how the hell does the slave trade thing happen? Then we ended up answering a whole bunch of them. But... I don't know, like, to capstone it, I guess. It still just seems to me like there's still a whole lot of unanswered problems with Red Operation. Like, for example, he was running printing presses, right? Cool, awesome, good stuff. Was he going to start a newspaper? I know he was circulating his propaganda posters, but...
That would be a pretty ballsy move, to just spread around a whole bunch of posters around the equestrian raceland saying, hey, come be a slave in Philadelphia.
Well, he already had his radio broadcasts.
But that was more him spewing his philosophy and trying to justify his actions.
Well, no, he was trying to preach to the wastelands because he was reaching the point, especially around Little Pip's time. His operation was reaching the point where he was going to try to find the two people he would combine with to become the new goddess who would raise the sun and the moon. His operation was at full tilt and at a point where he could hand off the reins. So it seemed like he was getting to a point where that was a recruitment message, you know? Not be a slave, but come, be a part of the new Equestria.
Oh, okay, yeah, that was a part of his broadcast, wasn't he? Like, join in unity was his, like, slogan or whatever, right?
Well, don't forget, that in particular was him putting up this act where he was the preacher for the goddess. Like, he was partnering with the goddess.
Yeah.
And pretending to be
that's
her pope, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was what his front was, I guess, was the pope of the goddess.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, did the goddess consume earth ponies? I've honestly forgotten.
I imagine the goddess consumed ponies of all kind.
I swear at one point I heard it was only unicorns, and
Well, the thing about Taint is that it changed the person it affected and changed their entire chemistry and biology to become an alicorn. And I imagine that could be done with either a Pegasus, a unicorn, or an earth pony.
I would assume so as well. I just swear I remember it being mentioned in the original story, but I mean that's something we could easily just.
I mean, yeah, the original goddess was formed from exclusively unicorns, but those were like the main building blocks. Everything else wouldn't really matter.
Well, wasn't that also why the goddess couldn't create stallions?
Because it was only females.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the original ones, at least.
Yeah. Twilight, Trixie, and Gestalt, and
Mosaic.
Thank you. But yeah. I guess there's some ramblings on Red Eye for you. I am...
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, I mean, whether the morality of his actions aside, the logistics were just another issue to tackle.
It's more or less the logistics rather than morality.
I mean, the morality of it is another matter entirely.
Red Eye did nothing wrong.
Man, did he ever? Did he ever do many things wrong?
I want to make it. If this ever gets to the point where I can sell shirts, I want that to be one of them. Red Eye did nothing wrong.
You're gonna have to fight Bethesda on the copyright for that now.
No. Oh shit, you're right. Fuck. God damn it, Bethesda, why?
Hey. They've taken more ideas from me.
Yeah, blood bugs.
Hold on.
The caimans. Fisher.
The Fishers. Oh god, I thought there was one more. No, it was just that design of the Fisher showed up in the Dragon Stone episode. Like the sea monster that was appearing out of.
Yeah.
I just had Nero message me one day saying, "Hey Ham, Fishers are now canon," and just showed me this screenshot of the. I'm like, I mean, it's like 10 times bigger, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's
surprising. It even had the little angler thing over the top. Like, what?
It's surprising how much Fallout and My Little Pony combined have like been able to canonize things from Wasteland Economics.
And hey, let's be honest. Like the I started criticizing some of Fallout's slave trade and how some of it doesn't make sense. But, in New Vegas, you have the Legion as buying up slaves.
Well, I don't think they necessarily bought up slaves. They just sort of acquired them through attacking them and killing them.
They have to have bought them because Paradise Falls existed. Like, there was the slaver town outside of Legion territory. Maybe they didn't actually buy slaves. Maybe I'm wrong. But my interpretation was that part of... yes, many of their slaves were...
from conquered tribes, and
which is how the Romans did it.
Yes.
Roman civilization was not that pretty. But I swear they also bought slaves. But anyway, that's my point though is that I criticized Fallout for having elements like that, where I was saying, how the hell did they have a slave trade? But I still love it. And you know what? I'm willing to just look straight past it for the enjoyment of the series itself.
Oh yeah, it's same here. I am able to just sort of shut off the critical side of me and just enjoy the entertainment for what it is.
Yeah.
So
it's like whenever I play Fallout 4.
Yeah.
Which I know so many people are disappointed with. And I'm not. I was never... And maybe it's because I had low expectations for this game. Despite the hype, I'm staring at this like, this is just going to be Fallout 3, but better. And that's what I got, and I was happy.
Personally, I had no expectations. I didn't know what to expect, and I think that helped me because, yeah, I do have problems with Fallout 4, but I still have fun with it.
But you know who also didn't have good expectations? Red Eye. Because he didn't expect Little Pip to remember his telekinesis.
Hey! Got him!
It's one of those moments I can't believe I ever forget about, because that was something when I was going back, like when I was gonna go try to do those Red Eye voiceovers. The one thing I was like, didn't he have a cool death speech or something like that? And I went up and found the chapter where he died, and I read through it, and I'm like, oh my god, I forgot how
underwhelming it is.
It was.
Yeah.
Was.
When I think of Red Eye, I think of him as being very conversationalist. He wouldn't necessarily have an intimidating tone, but he would be more soft-spoken. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to circle back, I guess, to the start, I always disagreed with the voice for him as the Southern Baptist, right? You know, it's the goddess will rid you of your sins. You will be saved in unity. And I don't even remember if that's what he said. I'm just doing a Southern Baptist.
Praise the goddess!
No. But it's yeah, he is that smooth, confident voice, that very just dripping with the knowledge that he is in control of the situation, even if necessarily he's not, because he knows he will be by the end of the conversation.
Oh yeah. Because he knows just the right buttons to push and how to get people to do his bidding, more or less.
You know, even if that means he's buying them and putting slave collars on them.
Well, I mean, that's just like the cherry on top, I guess you could say, but...
But yeah, we've covered that one.
Yes.
All right, well... I do hope that was a good conversation for this.
Oh, absolutely. Ham, thank you so much for joining me for merely the second episode of the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to having you on for more. So thank you so much.
Sure thing. I'd be happy to come back.
And before I end off this episode, I just wanted to say a few things here. First off, thank you to everyone for all the great replies to the first episode. I was not expecting the flood of comments and compliments I would get on YouTube, on /FoE, on r/Fallout Equestria, in the FimFiction group. Guys, thank you all. Like, you just... the things you had to say, it really warms my heart, and it really encourages me to do this. So, thank you all. This will definitely be a thing that I look forward to doing and interacting with all of you in the future. You guys are just the best. And also, you guys should know that there will not be an episode next week because I'm actually attending a wedding, so I'll be out of town and I will be unable to have access to the internet for a while. But don't worry, the show will be back in 2 weeks' time, so look forward to that. And I will most likely have a better plan and create a buffer for myself for future episodes. So, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I will see you all in 2 weeks. Have a good one.